An archaeological study published this week changed what we knew about prehistoric medical practices. Previous research had shown that a partially successful arm amputation dated back as early as 7,000 years ago. This case was also known as the oldest form of an operation. The skeletal remains of a European Neolithic farmer were found in France. The left forearm of this farmer had been surgically removed, and the researchers found evidence of partial healing. Such an amputation would have required a considerable understanding of human anatomy and a high level of technical skill. This case was consistent with the idea that modern medicine was born in the Neolithic. With the emergence of agriculture around 10,000 years ago, more and more people became farmers, abandoning the life of a hunter-gatherer. This resulted in a more sedentary lifestyle. We were faced with many previously unknown health problems. Innovation in medical care was now necessary in order to treat these problems. It is during that period that we begin to see the first major advances in medicine. But the discovery published this week on the 7th of September 2022 was able to track a successful amputation 31,000 years ago. The grave of a young individual from Borneo was discovered. This is a modern human, Homo sapiens, who lived as a hunter-gatherer, meaning that he lived in a non-agricultural society. A third of their lower leg had been surgically removed, probably as a child. They survived the procedure and died 6 to 9 years later, at the age of 19 or 20. The individual was buried in a deliberate grave with grave goods such as flake chert and red ochre in Leng Tibo Cave, which is located in East Kalimantan, Indonesian Borneo, in an area that contains some of the world's earliest dated rock art. The researchers were able to rule out non-surgical causes for the amputation because there was clean oblique sectioning, evidence of bone healing, and a lack of comminuted and crushing fractures, which would have been present if the amputation was due to an accident or an animal attack. Importantly, there was no sign of an infection in the leg, which is the most common complication of an open wound without antimicrobial treatment. An infection would have been highly likely in the case of an animal attack because microorganisms from an animal's teeth can easily enter the wound during a bite. So it can hardly be argued that this individual's leg was amputated intentionally. For a clinical amputation to be successful today, you need to have a really good understanding of hygiene and human anatomy, including the muscular and vascular systems. You need to have good surgical skills and the required apparatus, with the latter being absolutely essential for the survival of the person whose body is being operated on. Successful surgical operations have only been the norm in the past 100 years. Without recent clinical innovations, especially antibiotics, it was largely expected that a person undergoing amputation is going to die, either during the procedure itself due to blood loss and shock, or later on during an infection. In either of those scenarios, there will be no healing, similar to that seen in the skeletal remains of the recent discovery. So the late Pleistocene surgeons who amputated this individual's lower leg must have had a deep understanding of limb anatomy in order to be able to avoid fatal blood loss and infection. Crucially, they must have known that the limb amputation was necessary in the first place in order for the person to live. For the person to not only survive the operation but to actually be able to continue living with reduced mobility, the surrounding tissue including veins, vessels, and nerves must have been exposed and handled in a precise way. Post-operative care including feeding and regular wound healing would have been vital, while community care can be assumed due to the mountainous terrain the person was living in without a limb. This unexpectedly early evidence of a successful limb amputation indicates that at least some modern human groups in tropical Asia had developed an advanced level of medical expertise long before the Neolithic farming transition. It is speculated that this knowledge of human anatomy, physiology, and surgical procedures has been acquired through trial and error over a long period of time and passed down the generations through oral learning traditions. Complex medical acts like amputations could have been more common in this pre-agricultural past of our species than assumed today. Low preservation of the remains from this period makes it hard to say if limb amputations were a common practice, or limited to this exceptionally medically advanced community. but it is safe to say that the origins of successful modern medicine practices can be traced back at least 31,000 years.